Warning. This video will contain massive spoilers from throughout the entire Xenoblade Chronicles series. Play the games first and then come back here. Or if you have played the games, then enjoy the show. Also, this video will contain no spoilers for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 proper, which at the time of writing are starting to seep out. This video is purely a reflection of my own thoughts and readings from throughout the series up to this point.
Do you remember what the Alvis, said to us the last time we saw him?
Yes, of course.
Shulk. This new world is boundless. It is home to not only you, but many forms of life. I can see it. In this world, all life will walk towards the future, hand in hand.
When paired with these words again, and these visuals, one may be tempted to say that Alvis was lying, that there was no hope, and that there was no peace. But I feel that this is a misunderstanding of the series, of the promise that has been made, of Alvis, and it is my belief that all of Xenoblade and its actual true meaning can be found here and now in this place. It's only appropriate then that in these twilight hours before Xenoblade Chronicles 3's release that we attempt to put together the pieces and parse out what it's all supposed to indicate. In many respects, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 are inversions of one another. 1 sees you trek across 2 lands, become heroes, face demons from your past, bring about peace, and attack and dethrone God. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, alternatively, is focused less on the conflicts between people and rather the unity between Driver and Blade, and how that is challenged by the members of Torna. Rather than attacking and dethroning God, we instead come to understand him, his actions, his regrets, and humanize the once-thought unspeakable evil of Xe1's world. Based on the conflicts that are seen to this day between the fans of these games, it's easy to see that this design was likely deliberately fashioned in this manner. Xe1 sees us definitively reject determinism, embrace free will, and asserts that the destiny of humanity is bound in our free will. That hope conquers the darkness. Xe2 alternatively takes us towards a more realistic and saddening approach, confessing that conflict is inevitable and that it may very well be impossible for everyone to find peace. But at the same time, the game does not push forward into nihilism, much the opposite of that in fact. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 definitively rejects nihilism, as seen here.
Nia, take care of them both.
I will. Jin, why didn't you kill me when I joined Rex and the others?
It wasn't a mistake, was it? Becoming the blade of someone you trust.
Jin.
I did that too, once. Rex, you have to stop Malice. He's still searching for his own identity. Tell him the answer you found. Jin.
You should have died with Torna.
Let's end this now.
Xe1 and 2 assert that nihilism is not the answer, nor is determinism. Likewise, peace is not guaranteed. Jin gave in to nihilism, seeing his life and his experiences proved that peace was a lie, and that there was no hope for this world. He took on the role of the one who would punish this cycle and this world for the creation of its dogmas and by extension his pain. But ultimately, faced with the prospect of a new perspective through Rex and a lifetime of regrets, he buckled under the weight of his own malice, and he found, in a sense, his own peace. He avenged Laura and allowed Rex's pending answer to peace in this world to be accepted over the answer that he now definitively understood was wrong. It's through the union of these ideas that a broader, more nuanced picture begins to form, one that answers the promise that Alvis made. It's important to note, as the picture has come to be developed, we got a remake of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 in the meantime, one which gave us a vision of the future. And that future was not the fantasy land that one would envision based on the promise. Even in the once imagined ideal world, conflict persists. People still hold their personal biases, and conflict has not vanished from the world as though through the flick of a magic wand. And it's worth noting that it is not one-sided in this antagonism. We are not viewing concepts such as racism through the narrow-minded lens of one is evil, one is victim. Tetsuya Takahashi realized that this would be too narrow of a perspective. So there is another one within the game to show
Where?
this. What we see
Behold,
here is
the widening rift in the sky. It's proof definite the world abhors you.
Spare me your ravings.
Oh, Lady Melia, the hope of our race.
Gelgar, what is this treachery?
As you can see, I am sweeping away some pebbles. Their research is blasphemy against the commingled blood.
Don't you comprehend the import of what you're interrupting? The very future of our race hinges on their work.
You think this is the future? This reactionary struggle to revive what is long buried? The future of the High Entia is us. We are what the race ought to become. We are the true face of the High Entia.
what we see here is that it's not possible for one side to be purely evil and the other side to be purely good. That there is dogmatic poison running through the veins of many possible sides and many possible peoples. This is a very important piece of the puzzle. So what is this picture then? What is the meaning of Xenoblade as viewed through the lens of the whole series? And what is the point of what we are seeing in Xenoblade Chronicles 3? We see two opposing forces, one composed of the world and culture of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and the other of the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This is to indicate that Rex and Shulk were ultimately successful in their quest and then their sacrifices, in building a bridge which would bring about peace and unity between their peoples. However, this is ultimately a flawed picture of unity, which was already foreshadowed and future connected through the persistence of bias and racism. We are still yet unable to bring about true peace, even with the experience and progress the worlds have made in the battles that have occurred. The marketing and the hype for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 keeps speaking of a true enemy. We see the figures of Melia and Nia taking the positions of queens, who ultimately see a cult-like division towards them through the people by means of the system and terms. That, in conjunction with the Wild Riders, seems to act as a force perpetuating this cycle of conflict and violence. And within the setting we see gusto, we see celebration of conflict. They live to fight. They fight to live. In many ways, it's like what we've seen before in the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise. The answer has been there the whole time. It's not God, it's not nihilism, and it's not the evil people that would seek to divide us. Though, all of those are still factors. There are roots which tie all of these together. What the Xenoblade Chronicles series is trying to tell us is that it is dogma, which is the ultimate opponent of peace. Dogma, defined as to hold a belief and to practice and enforce it, even without meaningful reason to do so, often for the benefit of one group of individuals over another. It's a weapon that has been used for ages in our real world to sow conflict between people, to try and weaponize faith, to see the worst among our people ascend to further positions. And within all of these concepts, dogma is the root through which the covered themes and elements demonstrated within the previous games grow. It is dogma which has created the ideals of deterministic thought which Xenoblade Chronicles 1 seeks to reject. It was dogma that created hatred for the outside world and drove forth Egel's opinions and actions. It is dogma which has created the religious fanaticism of the Praetorium and subsequent oppression of Blade Kind, which Xenoblade 2 spends much of its runtime rejecting. And likewise, it was dogma that colored Jin's opinions of the world following the tragedies of Torna. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will directly examine this concept, the impact of unchecked dogma in a world that should be, by all metrics, peaceful. It doesn't even necessarily matter who were the true enemies of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. They operate within a world perpetuated through a system of dogma, where through a religious structure, people willingly go along with a perpetual cycle of violence, being raised within it, and as such, never questioning it. That is, until the start of this new adventure, when Noah and Mio are forced to question the nature of the world that they live in directly, by means of those who have escaped this cycle, the Wild Riders and Vandom, and seeing another perspective in the form of Ouroboros. I don't at all think that it is a stretch to say that by the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, the systems that exist to perpetuate this conflict will be uprooted, and that an unbiased opinion of each world will be allowed to grow organically, hand in hand. Tetsuya Takahashi is telling us that in order for his, and by extension the Xeno series' vision of peace to come to fruition, that it is necessary to divorce your own perspective and biases from the equation. To instead willingly listen to and learn from the other side, another culture, another people. The games do not, however, foolishly assert that we should accept evil then, as evil and malicious actors are routinely struck down. Instead, the games assert that among the common man, there is room for understanding which exists beyond the bias and dogmas which you have either knowingly or unknowingly taken onto yourself. And I know what many would say. That's nice and all. But that still doesn't explain why it is that Alvis said the things that he did if peace wasn't going to be the result. And I think that that's a good question, worth examining. While it's clear that Alvis's wish would take time to pan out, being like a god himself, it is unlikely that he would not have known that the problem was inevitable. In fact, it is my belief that he himself might have been the one to reconnect the worlds. And why would he do such a thing? Because Shulk's request was one for a world with no gods. What is the fear that the peoples of Bionis and Mechonis have towards Zanza, and the reverence for Klaus that those of Alres possess, but an abstract form of God, and as such of a dogma? Might the divergent opinions of the two halves of the world's creator in fact been the linchpin of this conflict? Perhaps. After all, both sides are operating with an incomplete truth of their creator, where the actual reality of the situation is in between, an interlinked truth, if you will. That would then paint a new picture of peace, as if the peoples of Keves and Agnes were capable of understanding one another to look past their preconceived biases, then a more complete picture of the truth of their world and their existence may then come to fruition. Rex and Shulk's sacrifices and progress that they made for their respective worlds were not in vain, but we need to consider something critical.
Why don't you just let it go? Who do you think you're doing this for?
I'm doing it for myself. If it helps put smiles on people's faces, helps them live their lives together, then that's my role in this world! Jin told me to take care of you. In his place, you know. Jin never wanted to die. He just wanted to connect with you. He did it because you showed him a path.
And how many people died because of it? You'd forgive him just like that?
Forgiving isn't that easy, but that's just the world we live in. We need to find a way forward within that world. Even you used to think like that. What?
I wonder what the future has in store for us.
Who knows? I'm sure it will be full of ups and downs.
Ups and downs?
I don't know what the future holds. But that means I can imagine the possibilities. We can achieve anything we put our minds to.
Yeah. You're right.
Both Rex and Shulk confessed to a degree of uncertainty in the end. They knew that their answers and that their truths were better than the blatantly wrong answers that which they faced. Both were smart enough to know that their journeys and the journeys of this world were far from over. It's my belief then that Alvis, or rather Tetsuya Takahashi, is putting these truths to the test. That it's not enough to say that they were right, that their actions were right. Those actions and feelings must be tested. Or rather, the worlds which they would go on to create must be what is tested. The test cannot but happen, because if we don't, then we run the risk of repeating a critical mistake. The world cannot be allowed to stagnate. We must continue to learn. We must continue to grow. And ultimately, through those tests, the truth will be revealed. What dogmas we must reject to make amends. What we will need to do in order to forgive. And importantly, to not forget that we determine our own futures, both of ourselves and of the world. Through all of this, a picture may appear of what it truly means to walk together, hand in hand. I've been Space King Scott. I'm signing off.